Some people remain completely stable no matter what life throws at them. Their environment disrupts everyone around them. Conflict, failure, rejection, chaos. Yet they seem to absorb none of it. They stay grounded, calm, untouched by the storm. What do they understand that most people don't? Most people go through life in a state of automatic reactivity. Someone criticizes them, instant defensiveness. A plan collapses, emotional spiral. A stranger gives them a cold look, self-doubt floods in. This isn't weakness, it's just an unexamined default pattern of the nervous system. But here's what behavioral science tells us: you can change it. Your emotional reactions are not fixed personality traits. They are learned response patterns, and like all patterns, they can be studied, understood, and rewired. The people who seem unshakable didn't stumble into that state. They developed it through a very specific understanding of how the human mind actually works. Principle 1. Every trigger is a mirror, not a message from the outside world. When something external upsets you, your instinct is to focus on the external thing. The rude coworker, the failing relationship, the unfair outcome. But psychology tells a different story. An emotional reaction doesn't begin outside of you. It begins inside, at the point where an external event collides with an internal wound, fear, or unresolved belief. Think about it this way. If someone accuses you of being incompetent and you feel a spike of anger or shame, that spike isn't caused by their words. It's caused by the part of you that's already afraid that statement might be true. The words were just the ignition key. The fear was already sitting there, loaded. This is a core concept in depth psychology. The idea that our strongest emotional reactions point directly to our deepest unresolved material. We don't get triggered by neutral events. We get triggered by events that land on something we haven't fully processed. Two people can receive the exact same criticism. One shrugs it off. One is devastated for days. The difference isn't the words, it's the internal terrain. This means that every irritation, every frustration, every disproportionate reaction is actually data about your inner world, not evidence about the outer one. Once you understand this, you stop fighting the mirror and start understanding what it's reflecting back. Principle 2. The illusion of external control and why letting go is power. The human brain has a strong bias toward the belief that controlling external circumstances will produce internal peace. If I can get people to treat me right, I'll feel secure. If I can make this situation go my way, I'll feel calm. If I can eliminate uncertainty, I'll feel free. But this is one of the deepest cognitive traps the mind falls into, and research in cognitive psychology consistently shows the opposite. The more tightly we try to control external outcomes, the more anxiety we generate. Our sense of well-being becomes hostage to circumstances we fundamentally cannot command. Here's why it backfires. When you need someone's approval to feel okay, you've handed that person enormous power over your emotional state. When you need a situation to resolve in a specific way before you can relax, the situation controls you. Every disappointment triggers a crisis, not because the event was catastrophic, but because your sense of stability was resting on something fragile. The psychological shift that changes everything is this: stop placing your stability in outcomes and start placing it in perception. Perception is the one variable you actually own. Research in cognitive appraisal theory shows that it isn't events themselves that determine our emotional responses. It's the meaning we assign to those events. Two people experience the same financial loss. One perceives it as catastrophic proof of personal failure. The other perceives it as disruptive but manageable data that points toward a new direction. The event is identical. The internal experience is completely different. When you stop trying to control the world and start mastering your interpretive lens, The way your mind makes meaning, you become genuinely free. Not because life gets easier, but because your stability no longer depends on it being easy. And here's what makes this counterintuitive. The less you need things to go a specific way, the less emotional static you carry. That clarity and groundedness actually tends to produce better outcomes, not through magical thinking, but because people who aren't operating from desperation or anxiety make cleaner decisions and project a completely different energy. Principle 3. The unshakable mind. Rewiring your reactive brain. Picture this scenario. You're going about your day when someone delivers a harsh judgment about you. Sharp words. Direct. What happens inside you in that moment? For most people, the nervous system fires before conscious thought even enters the picture. Heart rate spikes. Defensive thoughts flood in, or a wave of hurt rolls through. The emotional brain, what neuroscience calls the limbic system, responds in milliseconds. The rational prefrontal cortex, the part that can evaluate context and choose a response, takes much longer to come online. This is the core neurological reason most people feel controlled by their reactions. The reactive brain is simply faster. But here's the critical insight. Reactivity is a habit, not a fixed trait. Neuroscientists have shown that the emotional response pathways in the brain are shaped by repetition. Every time you react automatically to a trigger, you strengthen that neural pathway. The reaction becomes more automatic, more immediate, more overwhelming, but repetition also works in the other direction. Through mindfulness practices, cognitive reframing, and deliberate exposure to discomfort, you can literally weaken old reactive pathways and build new ones. Brain imaging research has shown that regular mindfulness practice reduces the volume and reactivity of the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, over time. The triggers that once hijacked your entire nervous system begin to lose their grip. This is not suppression. Suppression, pushing emotions down, actually amplifies them. The approach that works is observation. The moment you can notice a rising reaction from a position slightly outside of it, not caught in it, but watching it, you've created a gap. And in that gap lives your actual freedom of choice. The identity shift that makes this possible is this: you are not your emotions. You are the awareness that perceives them. Emotions arise and pass through you like weather patterns. The observer, the conscious awareness watching them, remains. When you live from that awareness rather than from the emotional reaction, you become functionally unshakable. Not because you feel nothing, but because what you feel no longer runs you. Principle 4. Your subconscious is running the show until you make it conscious. Here's something most people find uncomfortable. The majority of your daily reactions are not chosen. They're executed. Cognitive science estimates that the vast majority of human behavior runs on autopilot, driven by patterns, associations, and interpretive frameworks established long before your conscious mind enters the picture. When something in your environment matches a stored emotional template, a tone of voice, a social dynamic, a type of outcome, your subconscious mind executes the associated behavioral and emotional script almost instantaneously. This is why self-awareness is not a soft skill. It's a neurological intervention. The unconscious patterns driving your reactions were once adaptive. They were formed in early environments and encoded because they served a protective function. But carried forward into adult life without examination, they generate responses that no longer fit the context. You react to your present circumstances as though you're still in the situations where those patterns were first learned. The work of making these patterns conscious, studying your own triggers, asking what fear or belief is underneath a given reaction, is what disrupts their automaticity. Once you can see the pattern, you can work with it. Before you can see it, it simply runs. This is the practical application. When you notice a strong emotional reaction, get curious rather than reactive. Not why is this happening to me, but what does this reaction reveal about what I believe? Every disproportionate emotional response is a window into an unconscious belief operating just below your awareness. And beliefs, once visible, can be updated. The people who seem most psychologically free aren't the ones who never have emotional reactions. They're the ones who've done enough inner work that their reactions increasingly reflect their actual values and chosen perspectives, rather than the unchecked scripts of the unconscious. Principle 5. Becoming the observer. Practical detachment without emotional numbness. Here's a distinction that psychology makes very clearly. Detachment and numbness are not the same thing. Emotional numbness is the suppression or avoidance of emotional experience, pushing it away, disconnecting from it. Numbness doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to flatness and eventually symptom expression in other areas. Psychological detachment, what researchers call decentering, is completely different. It's the ability to observe your emotional experience from a wider perspective without being absorbed by it. To feel the emotion fully and simultaneously recognize that you are larger than it. A useful way to think about this: imagine a chess game. Most people are playing as the pieces, reacting to every move, emotionally invested in every position. The goal of psychological detachment isn't to leave the game. It's to develop the perspective of the player, able to see the entire board, able to respond to what's actually happening rather than what you fear might happen. Research in acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, describes this capacity as cognitive diffusion, the ability to observe thoughts and emotions as mental events rather than objective truths. When a thought arises, you're not asking, is this thought true or false? You're recognizing, this is a thought my mind is producing right now. That shift in relationship to inner experience fundamentally changes its power. The practical skill that builds this over time is real-time self-awareness. In every emotionally charged moment, you have two possible modes: automatic reaction or conscious observation. The conscious choice is not always available, especially early in this process, but it becomes more available with practice. Each time you catch yourself mid-reaction, pause, and choose your response, you are literally training the brain toward greater emotional regulation. The neural circuitry for deliberate choice over automatic reaction strengthens with use. And the downstream effects compound. When you stop reacting automatically, your social dynamics shift. You're no longer easily manipulated because your emotional state can't be reliably triggered by external maneuvers. You're no longer chasing approval because your stability doesn't depend on receiving it. You become what psychology calls autonomously motivated, driven from within rather than pulled by external reinforcement and threat. That's the quality people sense in individuals who seem genuinely unshakable. It's not distance. It's not coldness. It's the specific presence of someone who has stopped outsourcing their inner state to the world around them. So let's bring this together. The mind that cannot be shaken isn't built through avoidance. It isn't built through suppressing emotions or engineering perfect circumstances. It's built through a specific set of internal skills, understanding that your reactions reveal your inner landscape, releasing the need to control what was never yours to control, training the nervous system toward observation over automaticity, bringing unconscious patterns into conscious awareness, and developing the capacity to experience emotion without being ruled by it. These are not passive philosophical concepts. They are trainable capacities with a clear neurological basis. The brain changes in response to what you practice. Reactivity practiced becomes more reactive. Observation practiced becomes more available. The question isn't whether you can become psychologically unshakable. The question is whether you're willing to do the inner work that makes it possible. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway from this. And if you want to keep going deeper into the psychology of the mind, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.